They taught you California was the free state. The golden state where black people fled to escape slavery. The land of opportunity. The place where dreams came true during the gold rush. But what if I told you California was built on genocide so brutal, it makes Mississippi look civilized? In 1850, California had more than 150,000 indigenous people living on the land their ancestors had inhabited for over 10,000 years. By 1900, only 16,000 remained. That's 134,000 people. Gone. Dead. Murdered. In just 50 years, 89% of the entire indigenous population was wiped out. You thought the gold rush was about opportunity. It was about land theft. You thought manifest destiny was about progress. It was about extermination. You thought California was free. It was only free for white people who got rich, selling stolen land, soaked in indigenous blood. Your ancestors ran to California to escape slavery in the 1850s and 60s. They thought they were heading to freedom. But when they arrived, they stepped onto land still wet with indigenous blood. Land that had just been cleared by systematic massacre. Land that white settlers were selling cheap because they had just finished killing everyone who lived there. Everything they taught you about the West was a lie. There was no free land. It was stolen land. There was no empty frontier. It was cleared by massacre with government approval and government funding. Let me take you to one day, one place, one massacre that explains everything. May 15th, 1850. Clear Lake, California. United States Army soldiers surrounded a small island where 400 Pomo people had gathered. Mothers, grandmothers, children, elders. They had come to this island like they did every spring for thousands of years to harvest fish during the spawning season. It was a sacred time, a time of abundance, a time of ceremony. The soldiers had orders, written orders from the United States government. Orders that said, exterminate if possible the tribe. Not arrest, not relocate, exterminate. What happened next was slaughter so complete that the waters of Clear Lake turned red with blood. So brutal that 175 years later, the place is still called Bloody Island. This is the story they buried under gold dust and Hollywood dreams. This is your stolen truth. Because what they did to the Pomo people, they did to you. Same system, same theft, same genocide, same cover-up, just different targets. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why California, the so-called free state, was actually ground zero for America's genocide playbook. The same playbook they used 71 years later to burn down Black Wall Street in Tulsa. You'll know how 2 white ranchers enslaved, starved, beat, and raped hundreds of Pomo people for 2 years before the Pomo fought back. And how the government's response wasn't justice, it was massacre. 200 innocent people slaughtered in one day as punishment for killing 2 slave masters. You'll discover that California paid bounties for indigenous scalps and body parts. $5 for a head, $25 for a whole scalp. The same way slave catchers in the South got paid bounties for your ancestors. Same system, different coast. You'll see how the exact same tactics were used. Land theft through legal manipulation. Massacre to clear the land. Destruction of all records and evidence. Then erasure from every history book so future generations would never know. They used this playbook on the Pomo in 1850, then on Black Wall Street in Tulsa in 1921, then on Rosewood in Florida in 1923. Over and over and over. You'll learn why Black and Indigenous solidarity is the system's worst nightmare. Because together, we're owed everything. Together we see the pattern. Together we can demand what was stolen. This isn't ancient history buried in dusty archives. Pomo elders who survived this massacre testified about it in the 1950s. Their grandchildren are alive right now. Some of them are watching this video. still fighting for the land that was stolen, still fighting for justice that was denied, still fighting to be heard after 175 years of forced silence. And after you know this, you'll never look at California the same way again. You'll understand why housing is unaffordable in the Bay Area, because indigenous land was stolen first through genocide, then sold to white settlers for pennies, then they flipped it for millions. You'll understand why there's a 25-to-1 wealth gap between white families and indigenous families. You'll understand why reparations for slavery and indigenous genocide are the same fight against the same system. This is your history too, even if you're not indigenous, even if you're not Pomo, because their genocide normalized your oppression. Their stolen land became the foundation for denying you land ownership through redlining. The massacres they got away with gave them confidence to massacre Black Wall Street. The cover-up they perfected on indigenous people they used on you. We're in this together. And it's time you knew the full truth. Let me take you back to where it started. Not with the massacre, but with two evil men who thought they could enslave human beings and get away with it. The Pomo people had lived around Clear Lake for more than 10,000 years. 10,000 years. Let that sink in. While Europeans were still figuring out agriculture, the Pomo had already built a thriving civilization on the shores of the largest natural freshwater lake in California. They were master fishermen. Every spring when the fish came to spawn, the Pomo would gather at their sacred island village called Bo no Poti. Hundreds of families coming together, harvesting fish, celebrating abundance, passing down knowledge to the next generation. This was their rhythm. This was their life. This was their land. They were also the finest basket weavers in all of California. Pomo baskets were so beautiful, so intricate, so perfectly woven that they could hold water without leaking. Other tribes would trade valuable goods just to own a Pomo basket. That's the level of skill we're talking about. That's the level of civilization. The Pomo population around Clear Lake was between 8,000 and 10,000 people before white people arrived. They had villages, trade networks, governance systems, spiritual practices, everything you need for a functioning society. They weren't wandering around waiting for civilization to arrive. They were civilization. Then, in 1847, two white men showed up, Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone. They came from Missouri. They bought some cattle from Salvador Vallejo, who was a Mexican California rancher. Then they established their own ranch about 40 miles north of what's now Calistoga, right in the middle of Pomo territory. At first, Kelsey and Stone made promises. They said they were offering legitimate work with fair wages. They said Pomo people could come work on the ranch and earn money. They made it sound like opportunity, like partnership. It was a trap. When Pomo people showed up to work, Kelsey and Stone locked them inside a stockade, a wooden fence that became a prison. They gave them starvation rations, 1 cup of watery soup per day. Not enough to live on, just enough to keep them weak and compliant. And they made it clear. You cannot leave. This was slavery. In California, in 1847. While your ancestors were enslaved on plantations in the South, indigenous people were being enslaved on ranches in the West. Let me be specific about what happened, because the details matter. Kelsey and Stone enslaved more than 100 Pomo people, men, women, and children. They forced them to build an adobe house, permanent structures for their white masters. And when the Pomo finished working 12 and 14-hour days in the California Sun Building, someone else's empire with their own hands, you know what Kelsey and Stone paid them? Handkerchiefs. Not money, not food, not land. Handkerchiefs. And when the Pomo complained, when they said, "This isn't what you promised," when they said, "We're starving," when they said, "Our children are dying," Kelsey and Stone would beat them with whips. Public beatings to send a message. This is what happens when you complain. This is what happens when you resist. If a Pomo person tried to escape Kelsey and Stone wouldn't beat them, they'd beat their children instead. Imagine that. Imagine watching your child get whipped because you tried to run away from slavery. Imagine being forced to choose between your freedom and your child's body. And it gets worse. Pomo women were raped, regularly, systematically, by Kelsey and Stone and any white man who visited the ranch. The women had no protection, no escape, no justice. If they resisted, they were beaten. If they told anyone, they were beaten. If they cried, they were beaten. This went on for 2 years. 2 years of slavery, starvation, beatings, and rape. 2 years of watching their children die from hunger. 2 years of building wealth for 2 white men who saw them as property. Pause and reflect on this for a moment. This was 1847 to 1849. Your ancestors in the South were enslaved on cotton plantations. At the exact same time, indigenous people in California, the Free State, were enslaved on ranches. Same system, same brutality, same dehumanization, different location. They didn't end slavery in the West. They expanded it. They just called it by a different name. Chief Augustine, a Pomo man who survived this period, told the story decades later. He said, and I'm paraphrasing his words into modern English, 4 or 5 white men were among us. They wore heavy clothing and lived in log houses. They could not speak our language, and we could not understand theirs. We worked for them like slaves. They were bad men. If we did not obey, they would shoot us, like slaves. That's what he said. Because that's what it was. By the winter of 1849, the situation had become unbearable. Several Pomo had died from starvation. Others had died from disease brought by the white men. Some had died from beatings. Children were dying, and their parents weren't even allowed to bury them with proper ceremony. Kelsey killed a Pomo man for being lazy. Just shot him. No trial. No investigation. Dead. Stone beat a Pomo woman to death because she wasn't working fast enough. Beat her until she stopped moving. Then went back to his dinner like nothing happened. The Pomo made a decision. We can die slowly under their whips, or we can fight back and maybe die quickly, but at least die free. We cannot endure this anymore. Chief Augustine said it plainly. The Indians made up their minds to kill Stone and Kelsey. They could endure it no longer. They decided to take the final and fatal step. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. This wasn't murder. This was justice. This wasn't savagery. This was self-defense. They made a plan. Wait until Kelsey and Stone are drunk or sleeping. We have no guns. We have no cavalry. We have no allies. We only have rocks and the knives they forced us to use for work. But we have each other, and we have nothing left to lose. Around Christmas time, 1849, the exact date lost to history. Because enslaved people don't get to write the official records, a group of Pomo men struck. Picture the scene. Early morning. Still dark. The ranch is quiet except for the sound of Kelsey snoring. He's passed out from drinking. Stone is in another room. The Pomo men move silently. They've worked this land for 2 years. They know every inch. They know where the floor creaks. They know which door squeaks. They know this is their only chance. Andrew Kelsey wakes up. Maybe he hears something. Maybe he senses danger. He jumps up and runs outside. But the Pomo are already there. They chase him down. They surround him. And they kill him with rocks. Stones from the land he tried to steal. Rocks from the earth he forced them to work. They beat him until he stops moving. Until he stops breathing. Until the man who enslaved them is dead. Charles Stone tries to run. He makes it out of the compound. But they catch him. After a struggle, they use Stone's own knife. The knife he used to threaten them. The knife he used to cut their rations. They cut his throat with it. It's over. 2 years of slavery ended in one morning. Chief Augustine said they had their liberty once more and were free men. They took the bodies and hid them under cattle hides. They raided the food storage and took what was theirs. The food they had grown, the food they had harvested, the food Kelsey and Stone had hoarded while Pomo children starved. They killed some cattle and finally ate a real meal. Then they scattered. They left the ranch. They went back to their villages. They went back to their families. But they knew this wasn't the end. They knew white people would come for revenge. They knew the United States government would side with the slave masters, not the enslaved. They knew freedom would be temporary. And they were right. Think about this moment. These Pomo warriors had no guns, no cavalry, no allies, no resources, just rocks and stolen knives and absolute desperation. And they killed their enslavers anyway, just like Nat Turner in Virginia in 1831. Just like Denmark Vesey planned in South Carolina in 1822. Just like Gabriel Prosser planned in Virginia in 1800. When oppression becomes unbearable, when every day is torture, when your children are dying in front of you, people fight back with whatever they have. This wasn't savagery. This was justice. This wasn't a massacre. This was liberation. These weren't criminals. These were freedom fighters. But that's not how the government saw it. And what happened next proves that America was built on protecting white supremacy at any cost. News of Kelsey and Stone's deaths spread fast. White settlers in the area panicked, not because they cared about Kelsey and Stone. Most white settlers knew they were brutal slave masters, but because they feared that indigenous people were fighting back. They feared that if the Pomo could kill 2 white men and get away with it, other tribes might try the same thing. And then how would white settlers steal the rest of California? Benjamin Kelsey Andrews' older brother organized a posse, a group of armed white men who called themselves volunteers. They rode through Napa County and Sonoma County, and they killed 17 indigenous people who had nothing to do with Kelsey and Stone's deaths. 17 people. Wrong tribe. Wrong location. Wrong everything. Didn't matter. They were indigenous, so they died. But that wasn't enough. Benjamin Kelsey wanted the government involved. He wanted official military action. He wanted the United States Army to send a message that would terrify every indigenous person in California into submission. He got his wish. Brevet Major General Percifor F. Smith, commander of the Pacific Division of the U.S. Army, issued orders. Send troops to Clear Lake. Deal with the Pomo. Make an example. Captain Nathaniel Lyon got the assignment. He assembled a force of 75 men. Dragoons, which were mounted cavalry, infantry, even artillery. This was a military operation, officially sanctioned, officially funded, official genocide with paperwork, and the orders were clear. According to Captain John B. Frisbee, who was involved in the operation, the mission was to exterminate, if possible, the tribe. Not capture, not arrest, not negotiate. Exterminate. Let me say that again because it's important. The United States government gave written orders to exterminate an entire tribe. The government ordered genocide. This wasn't rogue soldiers. This wasn't a mob. This was policy. Captain Lyon marched his troops to Clear Lake in May 1850, about 5 months after Kelsey and Stone were killed. 5 months for the Pomo to hope maybe it was over. 5 months of false peace. The troops arrived at the shores of Clear Lake, and they saw Bonopoti Island, the sacred island where the Pomo gathered every spring. And in May 1850, there were about 400 Pomo people on that island. But here's the crucial detail that they never mention in the sanitized history books. Most of the Pomo warriors, the young men, were away hunting in the mountains to the north. The people on the island were mostly women, children, elders, grandmothers, mothers holding babies. old men who could barely walk. This wasn't an army that Captain Lyon was facing. This was a village. This was a community. This was a ceremony. Lyon demanded that the Pomo surrender the men who killed Kelsey and Stone. The Pomo said they're not here. They've fled. They're in the mountains. And even if they were here, Kelsey and Stone deserved what they got. They were slave masters. They were rapists. They were murderers. The men who killed them were heroes, not criminals. Lyon didn't care. He didn't care about justice. He didn't care about the truth. He had orders to exterminate, if possible, the tribe. And he was going to follow those orders. There was no negotiation, no trial, no mercy. On May 15, 1850, United States Army soldiers opened fire on 400 unarmed Pomo people trapped on an island with nowhere to run. Picture this: dawn breaking over clear lake, mist rising from the water, mothers preparing breakfast for their children, elders telling stories, children playing near the shore. It's peaceful. It's sacred. It's been this way for 10,000 years. Then the crack of rifle fire shatters the morning. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Bullets ripping through the air. Bullets hitting flesh. Bullets hitting children. The Pomo have no weapons, no guns, no chance. Some try to hide in the reeds at the water's edge. The soldiers shoot them anyway. Some try to swim away. The soldiers shoot them in the water. Mothers try to shield their children with their own bodies. The bullets go through the mothers and into the children. The lake turns red. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. Survivors said the water turned red with blood. That's why it's called Bloody Island. Not because of a small skirmish, not because of a battle. Because the United States Army slaughtered so many unarmed people that their blood turned the lake red. The shooting went on for hours, from dawn into the afternoon. Whenever the soldiers saw movement, they fired. Whenever they heard crying, they fired. Whenever someone tried to surrender, they fired. How many died? The official National Park Service estimate says 60. Other historians say more than 200. The truth is probably higher, because many bodies sank into the lake and were never recovered. Many were swept away by currents. Many were hidden by family members who managed to escape. What we know for certain is this: not a single U.S. Army soldier was wounded or killed that day. Not one. Because this wasn't a battle. This was a massacre. This was genocide. This was the United States government exterminating indigenous people for the crime of resisting slavery. But Captain Lyon wasn't done. After clearing Bloody Island, he marched his troops along the Russian River. And everywhere, he found Pomo people. He killed them. Men, women, children. Didn't matter. They were Pomo. That was enough. He killed at least 75 more along the Russian River, bringing the total for his campaign to at least 135 to 275 people dead. Entire family lines erased, entire villages destroyed, and entire people brought to the edge of extinction. And when Captain Lyon filed his report, you know what he wrote. He wrote all the Pomos at the lake were more or less concerned in this atrocious murder. Translation: everyone deserved to die, because they were all somehow connected to killing the slave masters. He called killing Kelsey and Stone an atrocious murder. But killing 200 unarmed women and children, that was necessary military action. That was keeping the peace. That was manifest destiny. No investigation, no trial, no accountability. Nathaniel Lyon was never punished. He was never reprimanded. He was never even questioned about whether, maybe slaughtering hundreds of unarmed people was wrong. Instead, he was promoted. He continued his military career. He fought in the Civil War. And when he died in 1861, he was honored as a hero. There are monuments to Nathaniel Lyon in Connecticut, streets named after him, plaques commemorating his service to America. The man who committed genocide has monuments. The people he massacred were erased from textbooks. And Andrew Kelsey, the slave master who raped and beat and starved Pomo people for 2 years. There's a town named after him, Kelseyville, California. Right there on the map. You can visit today. Beautiful place. Lake views, tourist attractions. And nowhere does it mention that Andrew Kelsey was a slave owner who got exactly what he deserved. The local history calls him a pioneer, a founder, a builder of California. Not a rapist, not a murderer, not a slave master, a pioneer. Pause right here because this is important. The United States government sent troops with written orders to exterminate an entire tribe. The troops massacred hundreds of unarmed people, and then they named a town after the slave master and built monuments to the general. Now tell me, that's different from Confederate statues. Tell me that's different from how they erased Ida B. Wells from history. Tell me that's different from how they named military bases after Confederate generals. Same playbook, same America, same system of honoring oppressors and erasing the oppressed. And it gets worse, because they didn't just kill the Pomo and steal their land. They erased the massacre from every history book for 140 years. They made sure your grandparents never learned about it. They made sure you never learned about it. They made sure California could keep calling itself the Golden State without anyone asking whose gold and whose land. For most of the 20th century, if you went to school in California, you never heard about Bloody Island. You never heard about the California Genocide. You learned about the gold rush. You learned about pioneers and wagon trains. You learned about building the Transcontinental Railroad. You learned that California was the land of opportunity. But you never learned that California paid bounties for indigenous scalps. You never learned that the state government spent $1.7 million, that's more than $50 million in today's money, to fund extermination campaigns. You never learned that 134,000 indigenous people were killed in 50 years. They didn't want you to know. Because if you knew, you might ask questions. You might ask how white families got so much land so cheap. You might ask why indigenous people today live in poverty on tiny reservations. You might ask about reparations. So they buried it, just like they buried Tulsa, just like they buried Rosewood, just like they buried Wilmington, just like they buried every massacre and every stolen acre and every burned business and every lynched ancestor. Same system, different victims, all connected. And here's how I can prove it. Because Bloody Island wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern, a system, a genocide that California committed with full legal protection and full government funding. Let me show you what else was happening in California at the exact same time. And notice how familiar it sounds, because they used this playbook over and over and over. Between 1846 and 1873, California's indigenous population dropped from 150,000 Tullers to 16,000 Tullers. That's an 89% decrease in less than 30 years. Historian Benjamin Madley studied this for years, and he calls it exactly what it is: an American genocide. These 134,000 people didn't die from disease. They didn't die from natural causes. They didn't die because they couldn't adapt. They were killed. Systematically. With government funding. With legal protection. With public celebration in newspapers. Let me show you how the system worked. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And you'll recognize it when they did the same thing to black communities 50 to 70 years later. First, they created a legal framework for genocide. In 1850, the same year as the Bloody Island Massacre, California passed the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. Notice the word protection. Sounds nice, right? Sounds like they were helping indigenous people, But here's what the law actually said. White people could go to court and petition to get indigenous people as wards. Wards meant legal dependents. Legal dependents meant slaves in everything but name. The law allowed white people to force indigenous adults and children into unpaid labor. It allowed white people to kidnap indigenous children and keep them until age 18 for girls, age 21 for boys. And here's the crucial part. Indigenous people could not testify in court against white people. So if a white person kidnapped your child, beat you, raped you, stole your land, or killed your family, you couldn't testify. Your word meant nothing. You had no legal recourse, no protection, no rights. Protection of Indians. That's what they called it. Slavery and genocide. That's what it was. Second, they created financial incentives for killing indigenous people. California paid bounties. Actual bounties. Like hunting licenses for human beings. $5 for an indigenous person's head. $25 for a whole scalp. And volunteer militias could submit expenses to the state government and get reimbursed for their costs. So scalp hunting became a business. White settlers would go into the mountains, find an indigenous village, kill everyone, cut off their scalps, bring them to Sacramento and get paid. Men, women, children, didn't matter. A scalp was a scalp, and a scalp was money. Between 1850 and 1863, California state government spent more than $1.7 million funding these militias and paying these bounties. That's more than $50 million in today's money. That's not a rogue mob. That's not a few bad actors. That's systematic government-funded genocide. Newspapers in Sacramento ran advertisements celebrating the killings. Good haul of scalps, 20 Indians killed. Like it was a hunting trip. Like they were animals, not human beings. Now think about slave catchers. Think about the bounties for runaway slaves in the South. $100 for a black body, dead or alive. California just applied the same system to indigenous people. And both were legal. Both were government-funded. Both were celebrated in newspapers. Both were called civilization and progress. Do you see the pattern now? Third, they carried out massacre after massacre with complete impunity. Let me give you 3 specific examples. And as I describe these, notice how similar they are to what happened at Bloody Island. Notice the tactics. Notice the targets. Notice who got punished and who got rewarded. April 1853, Untold Massacre in the lava beds of Northern California. This was Modoc territory. The Modoc people refused to leave their ancestral land. White settlers wanted that land for ranching, so they decided to solve the problem with poison and bullets. Ben Wright was known as an Indian fighter. That's what they called men who killed indigenous people for a living. He invited Modoc chiefs to come to peace talks. He said, "Let's negotiate. Let's find a solution that works for everyone." The Modoc chiefs, wanting to avoid more violence, agreed to meet. Ben Wright fed them a meal, but he had poisoned the food with strychnine. As the Modoc chiefs started getting weak and sick from the poison, Wright's militia opened fire. They killed 41 Modoc people who had come in peace unarmed, trusting that white men would honor their word. Ben Wright was never punished, never arrested, never tried. Instead, he was celebrated as a hero. And there's a town in California named after him. Wright, California. Poison. Fake peace talks. Betrayal. Murder. Sound familiar? That's exactly what they did to black leaders a century later. Fred Hampton was drugged before the police shot him 99 times in his bed in 1969. Martin Luther King Jr. was surveilled by the FBI, who tried to blackmail him into suicide. Every time black or indigenous leaders got too powerful, too successful, too dangerous to white supremacy, they were eliminated. Often with government involvement, always with impunity. April 23, 1852. Bridge Gulch Massacre in Trinity County. This was Wintu territory. White miners wanted indigenous people cleared out of gold mining areas. They didn't want to compete. They didn't want to share. They wanted all the gold for themselves. A group of white settlers attacked a Wintu village. They killed more than 150 people, mostly women and children because the men were away hunting. They didn't just shoot them. They hacked babies to pieces. They threw infants into fires while they were still alive. Survivors who escaped described the screams, described the smell, described watching their entire families burn. No one was arrested. No one was tried. The state government reimbursed the militia for their expenses, gave them money for bullets and supplies used to burn children alive. For more than 150 years, local history books called it Indian Troubles. Not a massacre, not genocide, just troubles. Like indigenous people were a problem that needed solving, and burning babies alive was the solution. Until the 2000s, there was no memorial, no acknowledgement, no apology, nothing, just silence. And here's the connection to black wealth that you need to understand. This was in gold mining territory, the same way they burned Black Wall Street in Tulsa because there was oil under the Greenwood district. The same way they destroyed black beach towns like Manhattan Beach in California because beachfront property became valuable. The same way they used eminent domain to destroy black neighborhoods whenever they wanted the land for highways or stadiums or development. Resource extraction equals indigenous genocide. Resource extraction equals black displacement. Every single time. When there's money to be made, black and indigenous people get removed by violence. And it's always legal, always justified, always called progress. February 26, 1860. Indian Island Massacre in Humboldt Bay. The Wiyot people were holding their world renewal ceremony. This was their most sacred ritual, their most important spiritual gathering of the year, like Easter and Christmas combined. Families came from all around. They danced, they prayed, they celebrated life and renewal. In the middle of the night while people slept, a group of white settlers rode out to the island. They came with axes and clubs, and they chopped 60 to 250 Wiyot people to death. Mostly women, children, and elders, because the men were away hunting for the ceremony feast. A journalist named Bret Harte, who later became a famous American writer, went to the island and saw the aftermath. He wrote about infants with their brains dashed out by rocks. He wrote about women mutilated in the most horrible manner. He described body parts scattered across the island, blood soaked into the earth. He published his report. And you know what happened? The townspeople ran him out of Humboldt County. They didn't run out the killers. They ran out the journalist who told the truth. 6 men were eventually indicted, charged with murder, went to trial, and all 6 were acquitted. Every single one. Despite overwhelming evidence, despite eyewitnesses, despite Bret Harte's reporting. All acquitted by all white juries who decided that killing indigenous people during their religious ceremony wasn't a crime. They killed them during worship, during ceremony, during their most sacred gathering. Just like Dylan Roof walked into Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston in 2015 and killed 9 black Christians during Bible study. Just like the Tulsa Massacre started the morning after Memorial Day when black families were coming home from church. Just like white mobs burned black churches during Reconstruction, they attack when we worship, when we gather, when we're most vulnerable, when we're celebrating our faith and our community. Because they know that's when we're strongest. That's when we remember who we are. That's when we connect to something bigger than their oppression. So they attack us there, break our spirits by destroying our sacred spaces. Same tactics, Indigenous people in 1860, Black people in 1921, Black people in 2015. Same system, same evil, different century. Do you see it now? Every time Indigenous people gathered for ceremony, they massacred them. Every time they built prosperous communities around Clear Lake or along the Russian River or on the coast, white people destroyed them and took the land. Every time they defended their territory or resisted enslavement, the government sent troops with orders to exterminate. Let me give you the timeline so you can see the pattern clearly. 1850. Bloody Island, at least 200 killed. 1852, Bridge Gulch, at least 150 killed. 1853, Yontoket, 41 killed. 1860, Indian Island, at least 60 killed, possibly 250. And these are just the ones we have records for. There were dozens more, hundreds more. Small massacres of 5 or 10 families that were never documented, never reported, never counted. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't frontier chaos. This wasn't individual crimes. This was systematic genocide with government orders, legal protection, financial incentives, and public celebration. And 50 to 70 years later, they used the exact same playbook on Black communities. Let me show you the parallel so clearly that you'll never be able to deny it again. 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina. A thriving Black community with Black elected officials, Black newspaper editors, Black business owners. White supremacists couldn't stand it. So they organized a coup, the only successful coup d'etat in American history. They killed an estimated 60 to 300 Black people. They burned the Black newspaper. They forced Black elected officials to resign at gunpoint. They stole an entire city government. And then they erased it from history books for 100 years. 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Greenwood district known as Black Wall Street. The wealthiest Black community in America. Over 10,000 Black residents. More Black millionaires per capita than any other place in the country. Black-owned banks, hospitals, schools, theaters, hotels. And white Tulsans couldn't stand it. So they burned it all. 35 city blocks, more than 200 homes, every business, every church, 300 people murdered. And then they changed fire codes so Black people couldn't rebuild. They denied insurance claims. They buried the story for 75 years. 1923, Rosewood, Florida. A prosperous Black town. Black-owned land. Black-owned businesses. A Black school. Then a white woman lied and said a Black man attacked her. A white mob came from surrounding towns. They burned every building. They killed at least 6 Black people, probably more than 150. They hunted Black families through the swamps, and the town was wiped off the map, literally erased. No buildings left standing, no memorial, no acknowledgement for 70 years. Same tactics every time. Massacre. Burn everything. Steal the land. Kill the witnesses. Destroy the records. Erase from history books. Blame the victims. Protect the perpetrators. Wait a few generations. Then act like it never happened. They perfected this system on Indigenous people in the 1850s. Then they used it on Black people in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. Same America, same playbook, same system of protecting white wealth by destroying Black and Indigenous wealth through organized violence. This is not a coincidence. This is not separate histories that happen to be similar. This is the same system targeting different communities for the same reason. Because both Indigenous people and Black people were accumulating wealth. Both were building power. Both were threatening white economic dominance, so both had to be destroyed. And both genocides had to be erased from history, so future generations wouldn't connect the dots. So you wouldn't realize that the wealth gap isn't about hard work, or education, or culture. It's about systematic theft backed by government violence. But they couldn't erase all the evidence. They couldn't silence all the survivors. They couldn't bury all the truth. And now, 175 years later, we're digging it up. We're connecting the patterns. We're telling the stories they tried to kill. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. But they didn't just kill the Pomo and steal their land and move on. They had to make sure nobody would ever find out. They had to erase the evidence. They had to control the narrative. They had to make sure future generations would never question how white families got so rich, so fast in California. Let me show you exactly how they covered it up. Because this is the part that connects directly to your life today. This is why you never learned this in school. This is why your parents never learned it. This is why the theft continues. After the Bloody Island Massacre, many of the bodies sank into Clear Lake. They were never recovered, never buried with ceremony, never counted. The Army didn't care about an accurate body count. They cared about one thing: making sure everyone knew what happens when you resist white supremacy. There are no death certificates for the victims, no official record of their names, no grave markers, no memorial until 2005, and that only happened because Pomo descendants fought for years to get one. The estimates range from 60 to 250 dead. That's a huge range. And you know why the range is so big? Because nobody bothered to count. Indigenous lives didn't matter enough to count. Just like slave traders didn't count how many Africans died in the Middle Passage. Just like lynch mobs didn't count how many black people they hanged. Counting would mean acknowledging they were human beings. Acknowledging would mean guilt. Guilt would mean consequences. So they didn't count. The Pomo villages around Clear Lake were burned in the campaigns that followed the massacre. Every structure, every home, every ceremonial site, all destroyed. Property markers that showed Pomo territory boundaries were ripped out of the ground. Sacred sites were bulldozed to make room for cattle ranches. Even the geography was erased. Bloody Island used to be an actual island in the middle of Clear Lake. But over the decades, white landowners manipulated the water levels for irrigation. They drained parts of the lake, and Bloody Island went from an island to a hill on the shore. They literally changed the landscape to destroy the crime scene. Army reports from 1850 are incomplete. Many are listed as lost. Captain Nathaniel Lyon's full report about the massacre was never made public. Only excerpts exist. Convenient right, the detailed account of how many women and children he killed just happened to get lost. Census data for indigenous Californians in the 1850s and 60s is extremely incomplete. Whole communities just disappeared from the records. One year, they're there. Next census, they're gone. No explanation. No investigation. Just gone. And the maps? White cartographers removed indigenous place names and replaced them with English names. The Pomo had names for every mountain, every valley, every creek, every island. Names that held thousands of years of history and meaning. All erased. All replaced. Kelseyville. Lakeport. Clear Lake. Nice white names covering up a genocide. The property records are the most telling part. After the genocide cleared the indigenous people off the land, California declared it public domain. That means government property available for settlement. They distributed it to white settlers through the Homestead Act. You could get 160 acres for almost nothing if you were white and willing to move west. But here's the thing. That land wasn't empty. It wasn't unused. It wasn't available. It was stolen. Every acre, every square foot. Stolen from people who had lived there for 10,000 years. No compensation was ever paid to the Pomo. Not $1. Not 1 acre returned. Nothing. And the property that Kelsey and Stone had claimed for their ranch that went to Benjamin Kelsey after his brother was killed. And he sold it. Made a profit. got rich off the land his brother died trying to enslave people on. This is exactly what happened after the Tulsa Race Massacre. Property records for the Greenwood district mysteriously burned in a fire. Insurance companies denied every claim from black families. The city changed zoning laws so black people couldn't rebuild. And white developers bought the land for pennies and got rich. This is exactly what happened after Rosewood. The town was removed from maps, land deeds were destroyed, and white families claimed the property. This is exactly what happened to Seneca Village in New York, a prosperous black community where Central Park is now. The city used eminent domain to seize the land, paid black families a fraction of what their property was worth, destroyed every building, and built a park for wealthy white people. They don't just kill you, they erase proof you ever existed, so they can claim the land was empty. Your wealth never existed. You never lived there. And then they call you squatters when you try to come back. But the legal system made sure the cover-up would last for generations. And this is where it gets really important, because these same laws affected your ancestors too. Remember that 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. The law that allowed white people to enslave indigenous people legally. That law had another provision. Indigenous people could not testify in court against white people. Think about what that means. If a white person killed your father, you couldn't testify. If a white person raped your sister, she couldn't testify. If a white person stole your land, you couldn't testify. Your word meant nothing in a court of law. So when Pomo people tried to get justice for the Bloody Island Massacre, they had no legal standing. They couldn't testify about what they saw. They couldn't name the soldiers who killed their families. They couldn't sue for their stolen land. The law made them silent. And even if they could testify, who would prosecute? Not a single person involved in the Bloody Island Massacre was ever arrested. Not Captain Nathaniel Lyon. Not any of his 75 soldiers. Not one. Across the entire California genocide from 1846 to 1873, less than 1% of white killers ever faced trial. Less than 1%. And of that tiny fraction, most were acquitted by all white juries. Remember the Indian Island Massacre in 1860, where they chopped up Wyandotte families with axes during their religious ceremony. 6 men were indicted. All 6 were acquitted. Despite overwhelming evidence, despite witnesses, despite bodies. Acquitted. The legal system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was designed to protect white people who killed indigenous people, just like it was designed to protect white people who killed black people. Between 1865 and 1965, there were more than 4,700 documented lynchings of black people. You know how many resulted in convictions, less than 1%. And most of those convictions were overturned on appeal. Same system, same protection, same message. White people can kill black and indigenous people with impunity. And then there were the treaties. Oh, the treaties. In 1851 and 1852, the United States government negotiated 18 treaties with California tribes. These treaties promised 8.5 million acres of reservation land. That was the deal. You give up most of your territory. We guarantee you this land forever. Forever meaning until we want it. But California's state legislature lobbied the U.S. Senate to reject all 18 treaties. Every single one. And the Senate held a secret session and rejected them all. And then they kept it secret for 50 years. 50 years. Nobody knew the treaties had been rejected. The tribes thought they had legal protection. They thought they had guaranteed land. They had nothing. By the time the truth came out in the early 1900s, it was too late. The land had been sold to white settlers. Cities had been built. Fortunes had been made. And the government said, "Sorry, nothing we can do now. Tribes like the Pomo had no federal recognition until the 1970s. That means for more than 120 years after the genocide, they had no legal status, no rights, no protection, nothing. Compare that to the Homestead Act that gave millions of acres to white families for free. Compare that to the GI Bill after World War II that gave white veterans low-interest home loans while excluding black veterans. Compare that to redlining maps that prevented black families from buying homes in appreciating neighborhoods. The law is never neutral. The law is the weapon. It was used to steal from indigenous people. It was used to steal from black people. And it's still being used today through mass incarceration, through civil asset forfeiture, through gentrification disguised as urban development. And to make sure future generations never questioned any of this, they erased it from the textbooks. For more than 140 years, the Bloody Island Massacre wasn't mentioned in California public school textbooks. Not once. From 1850 to the 1990s, 3 or 4 generations of California students went through school and never heard about it. The California Indian Wars were taught as frontier conflicts, not genocide. Conflicts. Like it was 2 equal sides having a disagreement, not a government systematically exterminating 89% of a population. The gold rush was romanticized. Brave pioneers seeking fortune. The American dream. Go west, young man. They never mentioned that those pioneers were stealing land from people they were killing. They never mentioned the 134,000 indigenous people who died so white people could get rich. California missions were taught as peaceful religious conversions, noble priests bringing civilization to savages. They never mentioned that the missions were forced labor camps where 60,000 indigenous people died from disease, overwork, and abuse. And the language they used mattered. They called it the Clear Lake Incident, not massacre. Incident, like it was an accident. Like, oops, we accidentally killed 200 people. They called it the Pomo Uprising, putting the blame on the victims, making it sound like the Pomo were the aggressors. Uprising means rebellion. Rebellion means they were wrong to resist, wrong to fight back against slavery, wrong to want freedom. They called the genocide pacification campaigns. Pacification, making peace. But you can't make peace by exterminating people. That's not peace. That's annihilation. And Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone were called settlers and pioneers. Not slavers. Not rapists. Not murderers. Pioneers. Brave men taming the frontier, building California, contributing to progress. Even the first memorial plaque at Bloody Island put up in 1942 used the word conflict. Not massacre. Conflict. It took until 2005 for Pomo descendants to fight and get a new plaque that used honest language. Massacre. Innocence. Genocide. 3 to 4 generations of California students grew up not knowing. Even people who lived in Lake County right there at Clear Lake never learned about the massacre in school. They grew up swimming in that lake, fishing in that lake, building vacation homes on that shore, never knowing that 175 years ago, U.S. Army soldiers turned that water red with indigenous blood. And because they didn't know, they assumed the land was always empty. They assumed white families had always owned it. They assumed indigenous people just failed to succeed. Too lazy, too primitive, couldn't adapt to modern life, never realizing their ancestors were exterminated and their land was stolen. This is exactly what happened with Black history. The Tulsa Race Massacre was removed from Oklahoma textbooks for 75 years. Rosewood wasn't taught in Florida schools until the 1990s. The Wilmington coup wasn't taught in North Carolina for more than 100 years. Ida B. Wells documenting 5,000 lynchings was erased from textbooks until the 1990s. Same pattern. Bury the genocide. Bury the massacre. Bury the theft. Bury the truth. Teach lies to children so they grow up thinking their wealth is earned, not stolen. teach lies so they never question why some families own everything and others own nothing. It finally started changing in the 1990s and 2000s. Historian Benjamin Madley published his book, An American Genocide, in 2016. That brought national attention. Pomo descendants kept fighting for recognition. And slowly, very slowly, some textbooks started including the truth. But even now in 2025, most American history textbooks used outside California don't mention the California genocide. Most Americans have no idea it happened. If you ask the average person how many indigenous people were killed in California, they'd guess maybe a few hundred. Not 134, not 89% of the population in 50 years. The erasure continues, the cover-up continues, and that's exactly how they want it. And the media made sure of it. In the 1850s, white California newspapers celebrated the massacres. The Sacramento Daily Union ran headlines like "Successful Expedition Against Indians" and "Good Haul of Scalps," like it was a sporting event, like killing human beings was something to celebrate. When Kelsey and Stone were killed, newspapers described them as innocent ranchers, brutally murdered by bloodthirsty savages. No mention of slavery, no mention of rape, no mention of starvation. Just innocent victims of savage violence. After the Bloody Island Massacre, newspapers wrote that it was a necessary lesson for rebellious Indians. Not murder, not genocide, a lesson. Teaching people their place through mass slaughter. Every massacre followed the same pattern in the press. They attacked first. Even when they didn't, they killed innocent women and children. Even when it was U.S. soldiers killing indigenous women and children. Their obstacles to progress, translation obstacles to theft. The newspapers created a narrative. Indigenous people are violent, uncivilized, dangerous, deserving of extermination. And white settlers are heroes, brave, civilized, building a better world. And when someone told the truth, they got destroyed. Remember Bret Hart after the Indian Island Massacre. He was a journalist who described the bodies, the babies with their brains smashed out, the women mutilated. He told the truth, and the townspeople ran him out of Humboldt County. They didn't run out the killers. They ran out the truth teller. If this truth is hitting you, if you're realizing how much you've been lied, to do me a favor right now. Comment "Truth" below. Let me know this is landing. Hit that like button if you're tired of the lies. And share this video with someone who needs to wake up. Because they're counting on you staying silent. They're counting on you not knowing. Every share is an act of resistance. Every like is a vote for truth over lies. Now let me bring this into the present. Because this isn't ancient history that doesn't affect you. This is ongoing theft that shapes your life right now today. Clear Lake today is expensive. Beautiful lakefront property, vacation homes, resorts. A single-family home on the lake can cost $500,000 to $2 million or more. That land was stolen from the Pomo in 1850, and the white families who own it now bought it from families who bought it from families who bought it cheap right after the genocide. If the Pomo had kept their ancestral land, every Pomo family would be multi-millionaires. Not from casinos, not from government handouts, from land, from property value, from generational wealth. Instead, the Habamatalel Pomo of Upper Lake and the Robinson Rancheria live on tiny reservations. They struggle with poverty, high unemployment, limited resources, and they have to watch white families get rich off stolen Pomo land. And California has never paid reparations. Not $1. In 2021, Governor Gavin Newsom apologized for the genocide. He stood up and said California is sorry. We acknowledge this happened. We acknowledge it was wrong. But the apology came with no money, no land return, no restitution, just words. Sorry means nothing without payment. Sorry doesn't feed your children. Sorry doesn't pay rent. Sorry doesn't return stolen land. Sorry is what you say when you bump into someone on the street, not what you say after committing genocide and stealing trillions of dollars worth of land. Meanwhile, PG&E, the utility company, has easements across sacred Pomo sites. They run power lines through burial grounds. Development projects continually destroy archaeological sites. And when Pomo tribes object, they're told, sorry, economic development is more important than your history. The Pomo have to buy back their own land. Think about that. Land that was stolen from their great-great-grandparents, they now have to purchase at market rates from the descendants of the thieves. That's not justice. That's adding insult to injury. And water rights to Clear Lake are controlled by the state, not the Pomo, even though their ancestors fished that lake for 10,000 years. Even though their creation stories center on that lake. Even though their identity is tied to that water. They don't control it. The state does. Now here's what you need to understand. Black families also live on stolen indigenous land. But black families didn't get that land cheap, like white settlers. You were excluded through redlining. You were denied mortgages. You were kept out of appreciating neighborhoods through racial covenants, so you're paying rent or paying mortgages on land that was stolen twice. First from indigenous people through genocide, then denied to you through racism. You're paying the descendants of thieves for property that should have never been theirs. The white family living in $1 million home on Clear Lake, their great-great-grandfather bought that land for $5 an acre after the genocide. Your great-great-grandfather was still enslaved. Their wealth is stolen from indigenous people. Your poverty is stolen opportunity. Both communities are owed, and this is why Black indigenous solidarity matters. The Pomo tribes are fighting to reclaim ancestral territory through the Land Back movement. Black communities are fighting gentrification and displacement. It's the same fight. Land justice, returning stolen property, honoring original ownership, demanding what's owed. Your ancestors and their ancestors both knew the truth. This land was taken by violence, kept through lies, and defended with state power. Time to take it back. Let's talk about the wealth gap, because the numbers don't lie. In 22 and 24, the median white household has $284,000 in wealth. The median black household has $100. That's 6.4 times less. But the median indigenous household has only $11,000. That's 25 times less than white households. Why is the indigenous wealth gap the worst? Because they have no land base. Land is the foundation of generational wealth. You own land, it appreciates, you pass it to your children, they build on it. Wealth compounds over generations. But if your land was stolen and you were never compensated, you start at zero every generation. The California genocide destroyed entire indigenous economic systems. The Pomo lost millions of acres, all of their traditional fishing grounds, all of their hunting territory, all of their gathering areas, everything that sustained them for 10,000 years. Gone. And reservations were established late. Many California tribes didn't get federal recognition until the 1970s, more than 120 years after the genocide. And when they finally got reservations, they were tiny. A few hundred acres instead of millions. Not enough to sustain a community, not enough to build wealth. The black wealth gap is also massive, and the reasons are directly connected. Slavery meant 246 years of zero wages. That's 246 years, where white families accumulated wealth, while black families accumulated nothing. Then, after slavery, every time black people built wealth, it was destroyed through terrorism. Think about the People's Grocery in Memphis that Ida B. Wells wrote about. A successful, black-owned business. The white store across the street was losing money because black customers preferred the black-owned store. So a white mob lynched the 3 black owners, destroyed the business, stole all the property. That wealth gone forever. Tulsa, 1921. Black Wall Street. 35 city blocks of black wealth. Homes worth millions. Businesses generating tens of millions per year. All burned in 24 hours. If those families had kept that property, their descendants would be worth $200 billion today. Rosewood, 1923. An entire black town. All black-owned land. All black-owned businesses. Wiped off the map. Land stolen. Wealth gone. Wilmington, 1898. Black elected officials. Black newspaper. Black economic power. All destroyed in a coup. Stolen. And then redlining from 1934 to 1968. The biggest wealth-building tool in American history is home ownership. But the Federal Housing Administration created maps that marked black neighborhoods in red. Banks wouldn't give mortgages in red areas. Black families were systematically excluded from buying homes. And in those 34 years, white family wealth exploded through home ownership, while black families were locked out. Mass incarceration continues the theft. 1 in 3 black men will be incarcerated in their lifetime. While they're in prison, they can't work, can't earn, can't build wealth. And when they get out, they can't get jobs, can't get housing, can't vote in many states. Locked out of economic opportunity forever. White wealth was built on stolen indigenous land and stolen black labor. Every dollar. California land alone is worth trillions of dollars today. And it was all stolen through genocide. The labor that built the South and made America an economic superpower was stolen from enslaved Africans. Estimated value $14 trillion in unpaid wages. Their wealth equals our theft. Every dollar they have, we're owed. This isn't jealousy. This isn't asking for handouts. This is demanding return of stolen property. And it compounds over generations. If the Pomo had kept Clear Lake land in 1850, that land would be worth more than $10 billion today. If black families had kept their Tulsa properties, those properties would be worth more than $200 billion today. Meanwhile, white families who bought stolen land, cheap, passed it down to their children who passed it down to their children. And now they inherit millions tax-free and call it hard work. That's not a gap. That's theft plus interest for 175 years. They say pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We say give us back our boots that you stole, then we'll talk. This isn't ancient history affecting today. This is ongoing theft happening right now. Every day you pay rent on stolen land. Every day they collect property taxes on stolen property. Every day the gap grows because they're still stealing. So what do we do about it? We demand what's owed, reparations, but not as charity, as returning stolen property. For indigenous communities, reparations means land back. Return ancestral territories to tribal governments. Restore water rights. Restore fishing rights. Restore sovereignty. And for land that can't be returned because cities have been built on it, pay fair market value today. Not 1850 prices, today's prices. Clear Lake Basin is more than 40,000 acres. At $20,000 per acre, that's $800 million owed to the Pomo people. And that's conservative. Some of that land is worth far more. For black communities, reparations means compensation for slavery. $14 trillion in unpaid wages. Compensation for massacres. Tulsa alone is $200 billion. Compensation for redlining that blocked $250 billion in home equity. Total $16 to $20 trillion owed to black Americans. They say that's too expensive. It's not about the money. Germany still pays Holocaust reparations 80 years later. The US paid Japanese Americans $1.6 billion for internment. The US pays Israel $3.8 billion every year, but won't pay indigenous and black descendants. It's not about money. It's about maintaining white supremacy. And here's the thing about reparations. If your grandfather stole a car and gave it to your father, and your father gave it to you, you have to return it. It's not your fault you have it, but it's stolen. You don't get to keep it just because time passed. White Americans inherited stolen land and stolen wealth. Doesn't matter that they didn't personally steal it. They have to return it. It's not reparations. It's returning stolen property. We're not asking for handouts. We're demanding our inheritance back. You are not victims. Hear me clearly. You are not victims. You are survivors of genocide. The Pomo survived an 89% population loss, and they're still here. Black people survived the Middle Passage, where 2 million died on the way. Survived 246 years of slavery. Survived Jim Crow. Survived mass lynchings. And you're still here. Survival itself is resistance. Your existence is rebellion. You are descendants of warriors, Pomo warriors, who killed their slave masters with rocks and knives because they refused to die enslaved. Nat Turner, who led the most successful slave rebellion in American history. Ida B. Wells, who carried a Winchester rifle and documented 5,000 lynchings while the whole country wanted her dead. Robert F. Williams, who organized armed self-defense against the KKK. Your ancestors fought armies with their bare hands. You have their DNA. You are heirs to stolen empires. Clear Lake belonged to the Pomo for 10,000 years. Black Wall Street generated $100 million per year. Your poverty isn't your fault. It was stolen. You should be inheriting land, inheriting businesses, inheriting wealth. You don't have it because it was taken by force. You are survivors. You are warriors. You are heirs. You are survivors. You are warriors. You are heirs. You are survivors. You are warriors. You are heirs. Not victims. Victors. You're still here. They tried to erase you. They failed. When you look in the mirror, don't see poverty. See stolen wealth. Don't see struggle. See stolen opportunity. Don't see victim. See heir to an empire. God preserved your ancestors through the Middle Passage for a reason. God brought them through slavery for a reason. God kept them alive through Jim Crow and lynching and massacres for a reason. Because you have a mission. To reveal truth. To demand justice. To reclaim what was stolen. This isn't coincidence that you found this video today. This is divine appointment. This is God saying, it's time. Time to wake up. Time to know the truth. Time to stop accepting lies. Time to demand what's owed. Your grandmother survived this. Your grandfather lived this. And they passed their strength to you. Now it's your turn. Your turn to carry the truth. Your turn to tell the stories they tried to bury. Your turn to demand justice they tried to deny. Subscribe to this channel right now, because there are hundreds more stories like this. Stories they erased. Stories they buried. Stories you need to know. Hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Because knowledge is power, and they've kept you in the dark long enough. Tell your children this story. Sit them down and tell them about Bloody Island. Tell them about the Pomo warriors. Tell them about the California Genocide. Tell them about Tulsa and Rosewood and Wilmington. Tell them their poverty is not their fault. Tell them their ancestors were millionaires. Tell them the wealth was stolen and we're taking it back. Don't let them erase us again. You are the keeper of this truth now. Every person you tell is one more person who knows. One more person who can't be lied to. One more person who will demand justice. This is our history. This is our inheritance. This is our fight. And we will win, because truth always wins eventually. It just takes people like you, who refuse to stay silent. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for preserving this truth. For 175 years they tried to bury it, and you kept it alive. We thank you for the Pomo warriors who refused to die as slaves. We thank you for the survivors who passed down their stories through oral tradition when every textbook lied. We thank you for the historians who dug up the evidence. We thank you for every person watching this who is waking up to the truth right now. We pray for justice for the 200 souls massacred at Bloody Island. We speak their names, even though history tried to erase them. We honor their memory. We demand their story be told. We pray for the Pomo descendants still fighting for their land. Give them strength. Give them resources. Give them victory. Return what was stolen. We pray for Black communities still suffering from generational theft. We pray for reparations, not as charity, but as justice. Not as handouts, but as returning stolen property. We pray for unity between Black and Indigenous communities. Help us see that we fight the same system. Help us stand together. Help us win together. We pray for courage. Courage to tell these stories. Courage to demand what's owed. Courage to face the people who benefit from theft and say no more. Courage to build the world our ancestors dreamed of. Bless everyone who seeks truth. Strengthen everyone who resists erasure. Vindicate the memory of our ancestors. And give us the power to take back what is ours. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Walk in truth. Demand justice. Remember the theft. And never ever let them make you forget. Until next time, know this. You are descendants of warriors. You are heirs to empires. You are survivors of genocide. And you are owed everything they stole. Peace.